Ready. Hello, everybody. This is Scott McDonald, and that's Mike Green next to me. And today we're going to be talking about places with promise. Now, last week we did this wonderful thing about places with the kiss of death. And we listed 10 locations that I want to exercise extreme caution when it comes to going to. Now, we're going to be doing 2019's Places with Promise. Now, these are essentially 15 areas, actually a few more, that are places that you might want to consider for a startup. Now, I know that there's some people who are going, but it's not convenient for me to go there, or how do I know there's going to be low risk? Let me explain to you real briefly. Our purpose in helping you to find the perfect place to put a practice, which is basically the name of our webinar, is to help provide background information on places you may not even have considered looking. Some of the locations that we're going to talk about today have just recently been launched. One of the reasons I'm just a little bit late, and I'd like to apologize for our audience, is really that we've actually had brand new data that has just come in. So this is pretty recent stuff, but I don't want to get caught up too much in the numbers. When you want to find the perfect place to put a practice, a best sites report or a practice site viability report are definitely the things to help you. And that's what we're all about, is to give you the answers that you might otherwise not have. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to jump into this with both feet. Okay. I hope you're having as much fun as I am, because, well, I don't get out that much, and this is about as much fun as I can have. So forgive me. All right. Now, Jake, I want to make sure that you mute your camera just in case you do something embarrassing that we'll get arrested for. So you understand, right? All right. Now, here's what I'm going to say. First of all, finding sites with the wind at your back is what the purpose here is. There are some locations that are going to be much riskier than others. These are locations that don't have as much risk as other places. And I've tried to find these in many places throughout the United States, not just in one narrow area. It's easier to run downhill is the motto that we have, meaning there are some places that are going to be a real challenge, and you'll have to work real hard and put a lot of investment in to make it go. These are places that you do have the wind at your back. It is like running downhill. It's a place where you can feel a little more confident about taking some risks. Now, one of the things that makes these different is all these locations are gaining population. That's one absolute. They have locations, however, that have long-term potential, not just a flash in the pan. Now, if you go online and look at a Google search and say, where should I put a practice, where is it growing most? A lot of times what you're going to see is a very small town that has a very big growth pattern. We tended to take those out. There are some good ones, I will admit, but I wanted to find those places that you could look in several parts of the area and still succeed. So I made a mistake the first time I did this, okay? I'm going to be honest with you. I had all these doctors calling local realtors going, quick, I got to go here. And that was just crazy. Not a good idea. And I can't figure out what the heck that noise might be. Am I in good hands? Okay, now, they have a lower than average risk, but that is interpreted in two ways. One is the costs and regulations are lower in these areas than others than you might find, particularly those that we discussed in the Kiss of Death. Also, you'll notice that brokers, realtors, professionals, and demographers have recommended these sites. They're not places that we just pulled out of the air. However, I will say that in judging these, I did go through them, and I have to tell you, I'm a little harsh critic when it comes to some places, because I get almost every day flyers and advertisements that, oh yeah, recommend your clients go to this place. Not so crazy about that. Now, please note a few things. Places with promise sites can be found in many places. These are not the only ones, but these are the ones that I think you have to put at the top of your list. There are like I said, 15 in general. Most of these places are going to seem pretty obvious because when I mention them, you'll go, well, I knew that. But stick with me, that's often the best logical way to proceed if you're looking for a startup site. Startups require more growth, more animal spirits or dynamism, and more sustainability to make them worth the investment. If a startup can't survive for 10 years, it's really going to be a risky investment, not as good a place as I might recommend. Purchase opportunities in these locations may, in fact, be harder to find because more people are looking in these areas. And if you go to a place that has the kiss of death, there'll be a lot of places you could look. But I wanted to find those sites that are going to work out best for you. Now, we're going to start off with one that I consider to be a no-duh, and that's San Antonio and the town of New Braunfels. Or New Braunfels. I always put an S in there that does not belong. So let's look at that real briefly. San Antonio, as you know, is in the southern quadrants of Texas. Yes, it does have a Hispanic character, but it has been Hispanic since the Alamo was overrun, okay? You know what I'm saying? And if you look at the towns that are on the main roads that leave San Antonio, and this one in particular, I-35, tends to go past Menchaca and up toward Austin. There are some demographers who are saying that I-35 is going to become joined with Austin eventually. But in the meantime, what we're seeing is a crazy amount of growth with new business headquarters that are moving here, as well as smaller businesses. Now, this is going to, like Shirts and Chibolo and Converse, are those sites that are right in the north and eastern side of town. But I don't want to restrict your potential here. There are several opportunities that are looking pretty good in this site. And McQueenie, I think, is looking better than I thought. Recent data is suggesting that these are long-term good trends for places to consider startups. Don't just look in the downtown, look in the north, east, and west, and eventually the south, I think, is also going to prove to be pretty good. All right, let's move on to the next one, which may be a surprise to you. Fargo, North Dakota, and Bismarck, North Dakota. Now, you probably know they're not next to each other, but they are in the same state. They have something in common, however. There are lots of corporations that have moved here because North Dakota has made it extremely desirable to move there. Now, you already know large banks have moved up here because the regulations have become much more, much looser for banking. And I won't go into embarrassing the nice banks that are there. But here's the relationship that you'll see. Bismarck and Fargo are on Interstate 84, I believe it is. And I'm sorry, 94. And this has become kind of an interesting place that's attracting businesses, but it's also grown because of the energy market. Now, the bad news about energy is when it comes to oil and natural gas, they don't build a lot of infrastructure that's permanent. Sure, the rigs are there and the villages that are housing the workers are there, but it's only in Bismarck and Fargo that we've seen a major investment in infrastructure, meaning that they're putting in recreation, universities, and just the things that it takes to live. I'm the first to admit North Dakota is cold, in case you haven't noticed, for those people living there. But it continues to be a place that is very affordable and low risk because of the lack of regulation. Now, I'm going to tell you something. When it comes to the places with promise, there are a lot of places that have that lower than average potential, specifically because regulations are low. And North Dakota is year over year doing a very good thing to keep their population growing. Now, this is one of those you're going to go, well, of course, Dallas, Fort Worth are great. Of course, you've all heard that Frisco and McKinney are doing very well. And as you can see on that north area near this little tab, I put Frisco. And if you look down a little further south, you'll notice towns like Plano. Now, these have long been popular and are doing well. The problem, if there is a problem, it's that they're becoming so crowded with people and practices in specific that it's becoming desirable for people to look in other locations. However, the metropolitan area of Dallas-Fort Worth is still looking very, very good. Part of it is the benefit of having a very flat topography. You can don't find any mountains anywhere close by. No one is going to be skiing Dallas-Fort Worth anytime soon, at least not snow skiing. But because of this, it allows for growth in lots and lots of directions. So the towns of like Flower Mound and Louisville have great potential because you can continue to expand as the amoeba that looks like the town. It's broader and broader. But it also has allowed infrastructure like the airport to grow really well. And the infrastructure, the interstates like I-35 that actually have you go up into Oklahoma, are continuing to be developed and desirable. The no-duh about this area suggests that any place that you go near an off-ramp is probably going to be developed in the next 3 to 5 years. That's why I'm really recommending Dallas-Fort Worth as a general market. If you can find something in Frisco, Denison, more power to you, whatever. But I'm just saying, Denison's a little far away, and so is Sherman. But the town is growing out that direction, and there are reasonable risks for you to consider going to. Now, let's talk about another place that may seem like a no-duh, and that's Tampa down to Naples. Now, these are not contiguous towns. Tampa on the north and goes down to Naples. But let's look at it on a map for a second, and I'll show you what I mean. If you look at Tampa up on that northern area and you follow the Interstate 75 down, there's a growth corridor that's going through Bradenton and Sarasota, Port Charlotte, and down to Cape Coral, and then Naples. Now, what we're seeing here is an upscale number of people moving primarily from the Northeast, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, and they're saying, I want to be in a place that is where I can build a nice house or buy a nice home. I don't have to make it huge, but I can have it very nice, where the cost of living is reasonably low. And here's the reason so many people are considering Florida. Of course, the weather is lovely, but what people haven't thought about is the tax rate. And the taxes, because they don't have an income tax, has made a lot of very wealthy people say, Florida's my answer. So they're going down. But they're bringing their money for investment, they're bringing businesses down, and they're bringing their tastes with them. And some people are saying it's a little too New Yorky down here. But the reality is there's also nicer restaurants, nicer entertainment, bigger places to work. It has become, this side of Florida, a desirable place to go and set up practice because the growth rate is crazy high. Now, remember, they have set up cities here that are between 15,000 and even to 50,000 that have grown up in a year. And because of that, there's a little bit of a glut in housing because people are trying to anticipate it. But it is also true that it's continuing to grow and is likely to continue to grow for at least 10 more years. Now let's talk about another place. Southern Salt Lake City, Utah, and down to Provo, Utah. Once again, they're not contiguous, but they are near each other, and there are some reasons why you should be considering it if you're trying to figure out, where do I start up? Now, a few of you in Utah are rolling your eyes going, there's no place to practice, there's too many people here. I know, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a professional practice, except for a few things that are changing within the area. That blue line that goes north and south is Interstate 15. And if you go from Salt Lake City, which is pretty crowded, down through the valley, you'll go down to Orem and Provo. That corridor that takes you down, it shows a tremendous number of new corporate headquarters buildings. It means that the tax rate can stay low because so many people are paying property taxes within these areas. Now, Utah is famously known as a low service, low tax state. But that is just making the cost of employment very low for people, and there is a lot of growth. Now, if you look at that area, which is identified as South Jordan and Riverton, there's a prison there. The state prison was always the end of civilization, except they're moving it. They're moving it to the north a little north of the Salt Lake Airport, which, by the way, is going to be increasing in size at least double, maybe 3 times larger in its capacity, which simply means people are willing to move their businesses there. But the other thing is, Utah has been very aggressive in saying we want lower middle-class housing and middle-class housing to spring up. Now, you can't put them up on the bench or up on the hills, but you can put them into that valley, which is north of Utah, Lake Utah, or Utah Lake. The reason that is significant is it's making it so that people from out of state can afford to live here and have a very family-oriented life. Remember, Utah happens to have the highest birth rate in the nation. And by attracting more people like that, they're actually kind of flushing out the employment base, making what we refer to as Silicon Slopes do even better. Now, full disclosure, I live in this area. I didn't move out of California, Sacramento area, by chance. I saw this as a coming demographic trend, and so far it has done very well. Now, let's talk the next town or city that's growing very well, and that's Boise, Idaho. Now, if you've ever been to Boise, it is a huge yawn. It is one of the worst nightlife places ever. There's nothing to do, all right? Now, yes, you can go hunting, and you can certainly go out and enjoy the spectacular fishing and outdoor life. But it is not a place that in and of itself you'd think, man, that's really where I want to go. Now, one of the reasons it's done reasonably well is Boise happens to be in a valley that has favorable inversion, so it's not as cold in Boise as it is in other parts of Idaho. But it also has this nice border with Washington. A significant number of people have moved out of Washington on the same basic latitude so that they can get to a place they can buy a home, have very low regulations, exceptionally low taxes, and very low risk. That's why Boise is doing well and is likely to continue to do well. Now remember, it isn't just Boise. It's towns like Meridian, Nampa, Eagle, Star. Those towns are really doing remarkably well, and they're primarily filled with people who are expatriates from California and parts of Washington. So you may not even know the difference with your neighbors, except they don't need a bath as badly and they frankly can afford their house. So that's why it's a good place to consider. Now going on, let's jump to the other side of the country. Nashville is a very large town, and north and west of it is Clarksville. Murfreesboro is a suburb of Nashville and is one of the fastest, most quickly developing parts of the, let's call it the mid-Atlantic, but inland state. As you can see, Clarksville is up there in the upper left. Nashville is here, and if you go a little bit further down, you can see where Murfreesboro, Smyrna, and some other sites are. Now, what it's suggesting is, yes, downtown Nashville, I wouldn't want to go there. Don't like it. But those suburbs are affordable, interesting, and I don't want to say it's no risk, but it's certainly a reasonable risk to do a startup practice of just about any type. That's because the cost of employees is low, your mortgage costs are going to be low, the business property is going to be low, and the state has a low tax rate. Once again, you might begin to notice certain themes of why these towns are the ones that are growing and developing so quickly. So this has to be on one of your lists, especially if you're kind of considering a place that might be family friendly and also be a growing community. Now this one came out of the blue. I frankly was a little surprised. Odessa in Midland, Texas. You might note that George W. Bush lives in this area in Midland. And it already had a significant energy market. A lot of oil and gas was being done here, and it's always had significant ranches. But what people were not expecting is, because of the topography and the development that has happened here, University of Texas and others, nobody was expecting it quite to grow as favorably as it has. Now, it's got about, within a year, when 16,000 people all of a sudden moved in. It's one of those places that, as people would call me, they'd say, you know, I just drove through Texas and I saw this. What do you think? And invariably, people are surprised to see the good and favorable development going on here. Now, granted, this is West Texas, and they get a little bit teary-eyed if they don't have some cow manure on their feet, or on their boots, I should say. But because it's an acquired taste for the right person who likes the outdoor life, wouldn't mind the ranch, wouldn't mind a farm, this is kind of an interesting place that's developing. Now, up in the northern western portion of Arkansas is Bentonville. Bentonville happens to be the headquarters for Walmart. So employment has been doing extremely well. But Springdale and Fayetteville are also showing remarkable growth and developed numbers. Now, when I say development numbers, remember, I'm talking about how much money is being invested, not in government buildings, but rather in retail outlets and manufacturing plants. And this happens to be one of those places that surprised a lot of demographers, how quickly and how long-term the sustaining growth has been going on. Now, I like Bentonville myself personally. I kind of like the vibe that's there. And I wasn't so crazy about Fayetteville. It was more of a southern town that just kind of seemed a little sad to me. However, it has turned over a new leaf and has been doing very well. Little Rock is off to the right-hand side and south. It is the state capital and has a lot of state jobs, but it hasn't captured the imagination of private industry nearly as much, nor have as many people moved there as have in this northern part. I'm recommending it for a person who might be a little bit of a risk taker, but wants to have a multi-site practice. Now, there are some of these locations that would be good. Utah happens to be one. But I think there's enough variety town to town and enough distance that you won't be poaching upon a patient base that you set up. So I think you kind of have to look at this with a serious look. Now, St. George, Utah surprises everybody because almost nobody knows about what St. George is unless you've been in Utah. People have been spending their winters in St. George for a long time. In fact, most people don't know this. Brigham Young, one of the founders of Utah, used to have his winter home in St. George. It got a little dry. They had some problems with irrigation, but apparently that has changed. St. George is becoming kind of the Western Florida. A lot of people who used to be in Palm Springs are finding their way to St. George because it's a very affordable place. There's a lot to do, although, frankly, gambling isn't one of them. But just keep in mind, Las Vegas, Nevada is 2 hours away. It's close enough that people can live there, go catch a show and dinner, and then come home. And I happen to know that Mike Green lives not all that far from St. George. And we know that he makes it down to the ice follies all the time. Or Spice on Ice, is that what it is, Mike? I don't know. Anyway, never mind. The point is, it's proving to be one of those places that you got to look. But don't get caught up just in St. George. There are lots of smaller towns like Santa Clara and Hurricane, spelled hurricane but pronounced hurricane, that are showing demographers this is a place that has potential. Now let's jump back to the East Coast for a second. Orlando and the Villages. Now these are not contiguous towns either, but they are close enough that you have to consider them to be places with better and better risk. Now Orlando struggled back in the 70s and then in the 90s and a little bit later on, but it became a better place when it varied its economy. It isn't just reserved for Disney World or any of the Orlando, the theme parks. It's got research centers, universities, and it is a manufacturing hub. And that is where things have surprised everybody. Now, if you go to the place that Villages, which is on the left-hand side of the screen and a little bit north, happens to be right now, at this moment, one of the fastest growing parts of the United States. Now, a couple of reasons why Florida overall is doing well, as I mentioned. Tax rate is spectacular. The weather is pretty good. I find it a little oppressive, I'll be honest with you, but a lot of people from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maine are figuring out this is a place that you can live. It feels like a vacation, but it isn't priced like a vacation place to go. So being centrally located puts you reasonably close to both coasts. Lots of outdoor activities. There's stuff to do here. So yeah, keep in mind the villages. Silver Springs, also further north, has some potential. Cassandra, Lake Helen are also showing numbers that are surprising everybody. Just keep in mind. Now, let's talk about another oppressive place as far as the weather. Greater Houston and Pearland. Now, look, everybody, I have done a lot of work in Houston, very close to the ocean, and if you love that saltwater fishing, my gosh, it's heaven on earth. But if you mind the humidity, this is hell on earth and not a place you ought to consider. I kid. But you see, there's so much growth that is now on the south side of Greater Houston. Remember, Spring and Westfield up on the north side is where everybody was going. That has kind of changed. Sugar Land, which is on the south and west side of Greater Houston, is also showing tremendous growth and very good potential. Now, you can get to New Orleans in about a 4-hour drive. It's not super convenient, but there are day trips that you can take out of Houston, north, south, east, and west, that are making this a better and better place for people who want to live outside, who like a little mild weather, and feel comfortable with a family life. Once again, Houston has things going for it. It has a very high per capita income, I might point out. Median household income in the United States averages $52,000. Here it's about $71,000, $72,000. So people are getting money in Houston, where before it was kind of your poor uncle's place to live. Now, an obvious place in Texas that people talk a lot about is Austin. I like Austin. That's fine. But downtown Austin is getting very crowded, kind of tough. Now what people are considering is a place called Round Rock. And I want to just show you this on the map. Now, there are some places, you can see that tab that shows Round Rock up on the north side. If you were to follow I-35 south from Georgetown through Round Rock into Pflugerville, it's one of those growth corridors that for a person who wants to do a startup, you got to think about it. Also, it's got enough variety in it that you can have multiple sites within Greater Austin, and they won't compete on each other. Now, I believe that the reach of Greater Austin is increasing on the north and the south pretty significantly. Menchaca and Buda are two towns that you want to kind of consider as well. I rode through the area just a couple of months ago, and frankly, I was very impressed with what I saw. And I have to tell you, I'm a little critical when it comes to putting places on my lists. You ought to know I took a couple places off the list after having visited them as well. But this is just undeniably a place where income is going up, cost of housing is holding relatively steady, and you can still have a very good lifestyle. Frankly, it's also easy to get to almost everywhere from Greater Austin because the airports have really improved. Now, going on to the places with potential, you probably knew this one was going to come up. Durham, North Carolina, Raleigh, and Cary, North Carolina. Now, this area, and if you look at Fairview or Graham, let's take Graham, which is at the extreme left-hand side of the screen on Interstate 40. If you carry that arc down to Raleigh, you see universities, you see manufacturing, you see development. There is so much money flowing through this area, and for some weird reason, when I talk to other doctors about this, they kind of go, where? What? And they're a little bit surprised and somewhat negative on it. I'm going to tell you something. This is a gold mine of a location. Now, you need to use our services to help figure out where to go exactly. That's why a best sites report is going to be very helpful to kind of navigate the places that are really doing well and the places that are doing okay. There are a lot of places in the downtown areas that are kind of just okay. But some of these outlying sites I think are doing particularly well. I was pretty impressed with Cary, by the way, and Apex, which is further south of it, and Holly Springs. Guys, I got to tell you, if you haven't been there, it's well worth a trip. And bring the kids, because there are things to do, and it's kind of one of those places that has really great weather and just a good ambiance to it. So, got to throw that out there. Now we're getting down to the bottom of my list, and you're going to be surprised at this. Las Vegas, Nevada, and Reno, Nevada. No, these are not close to each other. They're both, however, well, one's on the south, Las Vegas, and kind of on the west side on the north area. The reason that Las Vegas and Reno are good is because they've always had a very active entertainment industry. Gambling has been legal there. It hasn't been legal in California until recently, and then they got really aggressive in trying to get the big acts to come in. The problem is both Las Vegas and Reno were not diverse in their economy. So they were just pretty much the same thing, and that wasn't good. But they've diversified. They've diversified a lot. So now there's more kinds of businesses in these areas. The Delco plant that does the batteries up in Reno has done great. Las Vegas, of course, has always been a convention town, but now it's got sales, headquarters, banks, and some other big things that I think are showing Las Vegas at its best. Now, the thing is, people say, well, where should I go in Las Vegas? It used to be, I'd say, only go towards Summerlin, which is kind of on 215 on the left side of your screen. But I'm going to tell you, that area on the north side near Nellis, surprisingly good. Henderson has shown itself to be coming along very nicely. Boulder City is also doing very well. So here's the thing. It isn't like there's one site in Las Vegas that's looking promising. There are several, and the cost of living is not that high. Now, some people are concerned that Las Vegas is not so much a city as a monument to everything evil. Well, on the Strip it is, but there's a very big population of people who happen to be very good people living all over town. Now, my son Thane happened to take his 2-year adventure in Las Vegas and loved it, although you just can't go out at night in some places. Now, here's where we have Reno. Now, you might notice something interesting about that straight line that goes through Lake Tahoe. That's California. Incline Village is up on that northern area, and what's happened is the reason that Las Vegas and Reno are now all of a sudden booming, and I mean the last 2 years, is because of California. Reno serving Northern California, Las Vegas serving Southern California. People want to get out of the state because it costs so much. Taxes have gone up dramatically. And in fact, this morning, California was just named as the least business-friendly state in the United States, I think for the 15th year running, but I digress. It's getting worse. Now, when that happens, people tend to want to move kind of close, not super far. And Las Vegas and Reno both have that potential as being places to go where you can't necessarily lose your shirt and still feel a little bit like you're not too far away. Now, this is the Places with Promise. I want to just make an offer to you, and I'm going to do it only verbally, not visually. If you would like to get a discount on our reports, when things are busy, and they're kind of busy right now, we usually don't offer them, but I want to offer you as our viewers a little something. So write this down. If you would like to have a discount of $49, we're opening up Miracle Max 49 again. I know, it's crazy. You can't do that for our state briefings, but it should be a good idea for just about everything else. Right, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Mike, do you have anything you want to add? I know I've been kind of running on here.
You have been running on. That's correct. I think your list is brilliant. And here's the thing, though. Here's the thing that happens every year is that a lot of people, they look at this list and they think, I'm going to hurry, or I'm going to, or maybe I'm going to wait. Like maybe this list is going to be different. I was talking to a doctor just yesterday, and he is in the oil and gas region. And we were talking about how much that industry is impacted depending on who's occupying the White House. And that's something to think about. And it would be, it's interesting for those of you that are really interested in this to go back a year and see our list from last year, and you can see how it changes. That's why demographics is so relevant and why you need to know the demographics of today.
Right. Now, and by the way, that's why there were so many places in Pennsylvania that were on our Kiss of Death list, because of the way energy is being treated, or was being under the Obama administration. Well, all of a sudden, the United States is the #1 exporter of gas and oil in the world. And a lot of the places that we've talked about are impacted by the energy market as well. Now, look, we're always happy to talk to you. As a quick thought, if you ever want to use our services for, that Miracle Max 49, we will offer that for telephone consultations just for you. This is not,
which makes it a heck of a deal.
Well, it's only $225 at full price. You take that down $49, that's a pretty good savings.
Yeah.
But I know that you're going to have to talk this out with your significant other, and it's a great thing to go online with us to do a video conference to see how we might be able to help you.
Right.
You guys, I know I've gone over. I apologize, but I wanted to make sure we got through this list. Thank you all very much for your support and for telling other people about our services. If we can help find the perfect place to put a practice, well, that's made our day. Everybody, thank you so much, and we'll be bothering you next week. Mike, you've got the topic next week, don't you?
Yeah, just a quick preview. Next week, we're talking about branding. We're talking about what you should name your practice. So don't miss it. It's going to be great.
This is going to be the most classic brand management seminar you're ever going to hear. And everybody else is going to try to make a dime from you on this. We're not.
We'll give it to you for free.
Please take a listen. We'll talk to you later. Thanks again.